Good evening and welcome everybody to our live Q&A with our third Tiny Desk Adventurer. I'm really, really excited to introduce you all to Dr. Vanessa Bezy. We have a great, very special relationship, a mentor-mentee relationship. But while the titles exist, I think it's mutually been very beneficial to both of us. So it hasn't been a one-way learning street. I think I've gained as much from the conversations I've had with Vanessa as hopefully she has had with me through these last few months. And it's been fantastic to get to know her better. And I was super excited that she agreed to do this. I hope you all had a chance to watch her video on sea turtle arribadas. I mean, I think they're just wild, and just the fact that Vanessa sort of has done all this work behind it and captured this incredible footage, I think is really quite, I think it blows it. I mean, I've watched that video, Vanessa, your video, so many times, and I've seen it on, you know, when you've given it as a presentation, and I watched it when it was released by Nat Geo, and so it's mesmerizing. But what was it like for you, like the first time you sort of, you know, you had your drone up and you started to just kind of zoom out and see like this never-ending soup of turtles?
It was overwhelming, and so I should preface this with, I'm very lucky as a sea turtle scientist to work here in Oceanswell because we have arguably more turtles than anywhere else in the world. And I had always wanted to get up in the air because our experience of seeing an aribata was always from the beach. And so I had already been flying my drone for a few months over the sea and had already been surprised at the number of turtles. But this day was, I mean, like 10 times more than I had seen. So even though I was already getting used to seeing so many turtles, I had flown that day. I was flying like Transx, where the drone flies a certain way, and I can't, if something cool appears, I have to keep doing the research. So that day, immediately when I saw what it was like, I sent my assistant, go charge one of these drone batteries. We're going back out there when we're done. And I took the drone up and I was screaming. I mean, I was freaking out. I just couldn't believe because I kept higher and higher with the drone and there were more and more turtles. And when I landed the drone, I grabbed it and I just went running to the station and showed everyone the video. I was like, do you realize it's right there. It's like, it's swimming distance from where we are. And we had
Crazy.
no idea how many turtles there were. So I mean, and I watched that video ever since, thousands of times more. I just kept replaying it. I'm still just blown away by it. It's incredible.
It is incredible, and trust me, I've watched it thousands of times as well. So, you know, I'm just saying, and I really hope everybody's watches it and rewatches it and feels the exact same excitement, right? Like, I mean, I love the perspective where you kind of zoom out and you're just kind of like, you're like, whoa, there's one, okay, there's 20, okay, there's, you know, and it just like it's an incredible perspective, and it's a reminder that there are still all these species out there, right, that deserve protection. So I've had some questions coming in, and we're open to questions. So this conversation will be maybe 30 to 40 minutes. So if you have questions, do send them in. I will have to squeeze through to look for them, or I'll write them down. But I do have some questions already. So I'm going to start with, well, and this is related to the Aribada, right? Like, so you in Costa Rica, it happen every month throughout the year. And there was a question about whether or not it's the same individuals coming back every month.
That is a really good question, and we don't really know the answer. We know that some individuals do come back, but it's very tricky because in most turtle projects, the way that we know if a turtle comes back is that we put a small metal tag on their flipper. And then we look for the turtles at night and see if they have a flipper tag. The problem in the Sunal is there are thousands of turtles, and so looking for those tags is like looking for a needle in a haystack, literally. And so it's very hard for us to know just how many of them are coming back. But what usually happens is that occasionally our turtles go to another beach where there are fewer turtles, and there we get reports, oh, the turtle that was in the Aribata came to this other beach. So our turtles might engage in more than one aribata and come back. They might also nest solitarily on other nearby beaches or even beaches far away, and we still have so much more to learn about that.
It's crazy. And so you can't really keep track of individuals, right? You can't really do photo ID when you have that many individuals out there, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
pretty.
very hard. know, we do our best to have people running up and down the beach looking for tags, but it's tricky. And most of the tagging methods we have, there are other methods where instead of a metal tag that's external, there's like a little chip that you put in the turtle, but then you have to go scan the turtle. So our problem is there are too many turtles really to know, and we have to come up with more creative ways to keep track of them.
Yeah, that's true. It's crazy. And so they come out, and it's just the females who come out. Is that right? Yeah. And what do they feed on? That was another question that we got. So I'm gonna put it out there and ask.
Turtles are omnivorous. They eat a little bit of everything. They are animals that spend a lot of time in the open sea. They take deep dives. They travel very long distances. So we think that their diet is very varied. Anything from small crustaceans, fish, jellyfish, um,
Mm.
maybe even some algae. So we know that they eat a little bit of everything, but we still don't know a whole lot actually about specifically the olive ridley sea turtle's diet. They're probably the most understudied sea turtle. There's not as much funding for research with olive ridleys because they're not as high up on the list of priorities. They're perhaps the least endangered of the turtles. So there's still a lot more research to be done on olive ridleys, and we know very little.
Okay, well, that's always tricky. But when you see these kind of aribadas and events like this, you know that these are particular areas that need to be protected. And I know that's something that you've been really kind of working on. And you mentioned that there was good news from Costa Rica, before we sort of launched into this officially. So, like, would you like to share that with everyone, like all the good news from today being Global Biodiversity Day?
Yes, well, there's a lot of exciting things going on in Costa Rica. Today, the president of Costa Rica made an announcement that Costa Rica is planning essentially a response to COVID by investing in pushing economic solutions that are based in nature. So recognizing that this entire, situation with COVID in some ways arises from biodiversity loss, from habitat degradation, and that this is all relevant to human health. The Costa Rican government is planning on, growing the economy, but doing so in a way that's based in nature. And we are really, really hoping that our project here, the sea turtles, can be an example of how we can sustainably promote sea turtle tourism while also making sure that there's income for local families for the protection of these species, and that this is something that can really support the local economy in the long term while making sure that we protect this important site. So we're really excited to hear the announcement of Costa Rica, and we're working with a lot of different groups and organizations to present this proposal to the Ministry of the Environment and see how we can move forward with this project.
It's very cool. And so what are kind of challenges in terms of threats that these turtles have been facing that you think will be alleviated by this new announcement?
So many. The biggest thing for Oceanswell is that it's a very small, remote town, but it's actually right next door to a place called Nosara that is recently getting a lot of attention internationally as a great travel destination, especially for surfers and yogis. It turns out that's right next door to Oceanswell. It's just a stone's throw away. And in the past, these have always kind of been separate entities, but they're actually connected by the same protected area, and they depend on these protected beaches for their current economy. And so our goal is to ensure that this doesn't turn into an over tourism and over development, to come up with sustainable solutions to make sure that in some ways we take advantage of this little break from tourism that we're getting from COVID to prepare for when tourism up, so that the turtles are less impacted, especially by the tourism, but also as it stands currently, the tourism isn't actually even providing that much income for sea turtle conservation. Really, the local guides are the only ones that are able to benefit, and even then, they're not benefiting very much. So we want to make sure that we can optimize and increase the amount of financial support that we get from this incredible phenomenon, and minimize the impact that it has on the turtles at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really the best way to look at it, right? Like you're involving community, you're making sure that kind of all the stakeholders are feeling like they're part of this whole process, which is really important. I know you work very closely with the park rangers, for example, with in terms of education, you work with the community, you try to kind of share with the knowledge with kids in the local schools. I know you're trying to work with the university. So you really are trying to kind of bring it all together, which I think is incredibly important. And I think that's just really how conservation happens, right? Um, but like this is a really good, obviously big positive piece of news, right? And I'm so obviously this is something to really celebrate. But I do know that like turtles across the world, like this COVID period hasn't necessarily been so positive for them. We have heard of these aribadas happening in Orissa. I think there was that big aribada when India went into lockdown and researchers weren't necessarily able to get out there and maybe document it. And that's not an event that happens as regularly as yours. So I suppose it's kind of a little frustrating. But like, what other kind of negative things happened during this period when there weren't enough eyes on the ground and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there are reports that there's turtles coming on beaches that are now completely empty. And so in some ways this can be positive over the short term for turtles, but long term sea turtle conservation is facing a lot of challenges. Most sea turtle conservation projects rely almost entirely on tourism and donations from tourists to run their entire program. And so there's now a huge challenge for sea turtle conservation in coming up with creative ways to create revenue that will support these projects. And as you mentioned, especially the lack of presence for enforcement on the beaches. For example, all of the research permits here in Costa Rica, where I am, were suspended until June, so I haven't been able to be out there and do research. We don't have a lot of park rangers, and in some ways here, the community is part of what they help the park rangers monitor the beach by their presence. We have kind of an alliance between the people here in the Nosara area that help give that reinforcement. And so in some ways, not having the people on the beach in remote places like this where we don't have as much government support is a huge challenge for us. And so we're hoping that we can get back out on the beaches soon, and at least have some eyes out there to make sure that there's no poaching happening, there's no nests getting destroyed, and to really keep our eyes and ears open for any threats that are out there.
Yeah. And I mean, so it's really interesting because like you say, there's not enough eyes out there. So there's been reports of more poaching, but then at the same time with lockdown, there's a lot of people who didn't have their daily wage, and so or like, and so for them, like, this was a method of generating income. And so how do we balance these things, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of, it's tricky, but like, what, like, do you have any thoughts around that?
I do. A lot of what we are doing here in the area is looking at other models that have worked. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Every place is unique and has its own challenges that you have to think of. But here in Oceanswell, I have been looking a lot to actually Rwanda and their guerrilla tourism industry. There are a lot of ways to take poachers and make them into the people that actually end up protecting the environment, to teach the local community that a sea turtle or a gorilla or whatever it is worth more alive than dead. And that's a long process of change making and adaptation for some, and we have to be really conscious of obviously protecting also the local culture and heritage. So it's a trial and error process. It's a learning
Mhm.
process that we all have to work towards, but there are definitely ways to work together and find alternative sources of income that are, over the long term going to be much more sustainable on both ends, for the turtles and for the people that are making money off of them.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another question that's just come in, and it says, has there been consideration for the potential of satellite imagery to count individuals and to understand the scale of your Aribada events?
Wow, I have never considered that. I'm sure we could do it, but I'm not sure how good the resolution would be on satellite imagery. We have thought about doing it with drones. We use drones actually to look at the number of turtles out at sea and to estimate based on the ones that we can see on the surface. On the beach, actually, we have a little bit more of an old school method where we kind of walk up and down the beach in zigzags and do counts of turtles that then can be estimated based on the turtles we count. So there are a lot of challenges, but we do already have methods in place for measuring these Aribata events, the number of turtles that actually nest, and also the number of turtles out in the water. So there's definitely ways we could be more creative and improve those techniques, but for now, we have at least the basics.
Yeah. So because I mean they definitely use satellite imagery for penguin colonies and for seals and stuff like that. But how long are the turtles on land when they come on land? I mean, I think that might be a consideration as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the biggest considerations to make for us to have a good estimate of how many turtles come up onto the beach and nest. We really have to be surveying. We survey every 2 hours. The turtle spends only about an hour on the beach, and not every turtle that comes up onto the beach lays a nest. And so that's a really important distinction for us to make when we're thinking about, how many eggs are laid, how many hatchlings come from this. Those are really the numbers that are important for long-term monitoring of the population. And so that's why we have people on the beach actually confirming that turtles are laying eggs, and we count just those turtles that are laying eggs in our estimate so that it's more accurate.
Okay. Sounds cool. I mean, I mean, sounds like you guys have the basics down and there's some sort of system, but yeah, being creative. I suppose there's ways to adapt. Like you say, no need to reinvent the wheel. So you learn from other people working on sea turtles and then probably cross species and stuff like that, right? So there's all kinds of opportunity. I guess in more tropical areas, sometimes it's more difficult to get satellite imagery that's of appropriate quality because of more cloud cover and stuff like that. And that's something we struggle with out here in Sri Lanka. So why do the turtles come to the beach if not to nest? That's another question that just came in.
That's a great question. Well, most of the turtles that are coming up onto the beach have, let's say, the urge to nest. They need to nest. They all probably have eggs inside of them, and they're ready to nest. But the issue during the Aribata is that there are so many turtles on the beach that that turtle might not find a proper place to nest without being disturbed by another turtle. So what happens in Aribata is that a lot of turtles are kind of making false attempts to nest, and then they will keep trying until they find a spot. So a turtle might come up onto the beach, not be successful, go back into the water, and we oftentimes actually see the same turtle come back that same night, just a little farther down. So they essentially keep trying until they finally find a spot that works for them.
Oh, okay, cool. And so there's another question. Do all the eggs hatch?
Not at all. So that's one thing that makes Oceanswell very unique, and Aribata beaches in general. We have so many nests that get laid here, and such a high density of turtles that the turtles that come to nest after that first wave of turtles oftentimes are digging up nests that were just laid. So some nests actually, I think it's something like 20 to 30% of the nests during an Aribata are getting destroyed by the same turtles themselves, the ones that come up afterwards. Then the ones that survive that have to survive the entire incubation period, which can mean a nest might flood, or it might be too hot or too dry. There's a lot of factors that can kill a sea turtle embryo when it's still even in the nest. And then when it hatches, on average here in Oceanswell, our hatching success is only about 15%. And that's actually because there are so many nests in the ground that we also have issues with bacteria and fungal invasions of the nest. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario. We don't know what's causing what. It's all happening at once, and that these turtles have a lot of factors to survive, even just to make it to the ocean before facing all the other threats. The good thing is that there are so many turtles here in Oceanswell that if you think about it in a safety in numbers term, imagine we have hundreds of thousands of females, each laying hundreds of eggs. Even if only 15% of those hatch, we still have a lot of hatchlings coming out of Oceanswell.
Yeah, that's true. And that, I mean, it's the scale of things, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing that I think it's hard to wrap your head around, but there's just thousands of turtles, and each one, like you say, laying that many eggs. And so it's and it is a safety numbers thing, which is exactly what you talk about also in your video. So everyone, don't forget to watch Vanessa's Tiny Desk Adventures video that precedes this conversation, to really get to grips with what an aribada is and how it happens and why it happens and stuff like that. There's another question: are ghost crabs an issue for your turtles as well? It's a problem in Western Australia.
Yeah, they are. I wouldn't say it's the biggest threat that we have. We actually have a really big problem right now with stray dogs getting into nests. They're probably our biggest, because that's a non-natural predator. But we have all kinds of predators on the beach. It's kind of a free-for-all here in Oceanswell. There's ghost crabs, we have vultures, we have the crested caracara also eats sometimes hatchlings. And all kinds of frigate birds are swooping down and eating the hatchlings in the water. So yeah, we have, you name it, I'm sure we have the predator for it here. There's, yeah, lots of baby turtles, unfortunately, for them to go after.
Their lives are like giant obstacle courses, basically, right? And then on top of that, there's another question: how big of an issue is climate change for sea turtles, considering sex is determined by temperature? And I know that's been something that's been a problem in places like Australia, where they're finding more females because more rising temperatures. Can you explain, first of all, like how sex is determined in turtles for those of people who don't really know, and then maybe just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the sex of sea turtles and some other species is determined by the temperature during incubation. So the easiest way to remember it is cool dudes and hot chicks. So the males come from the cooler temperatures, and the females come from higher temperatures in the nest. And there's kind of a what we call a pivotal temperature, where we would have perfectly 50% males and 50% females. Here in Oceanswell and a lot of beaches around the world, we're already seeing more females coming from the nest than males. This is obviously a really big issue, because we need males and females to continue making baby turtles. And the other issue is that once the temperature of the nest reaches what we call the lethal point, that means the nest is too hot for anything to survive. And in some beaches, we are seeing this happen as well. Here in Oceanswell, in the dry season, when there is no rain to really keep those nest temperatures lower, occasionally the sand gets so hot and dry that we have 0% hatchlings coming. So that's really the even more concerning threat, is that we might reach temperatures where the sea turtles don't even survive. The lucky part is that we need the females more than the males. So for now, it's not the worst case scenario, but obviously we still need enough males to be able to find, the females can find their mate. So that's a really huge concern. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest threats that climate change poses to sea turtles. In addition to sea level rise, reducing the habitat that's available, in addition to increasing temperatures completely, having a huge impact on the marine ecosystem, which obviously sea turtles depend on. But I'd say that temperature is really a really huge problem for sea turtles because of that.
And there's another question, and I think this might be from Navika, who's one of our 8-year-old ocean heroes, and I'm assuming that's from him, but I'm pretty sure it is. Do seagulls eat baby turtles?
That's a good question. I'm sure they could. We don't have seagulls here. And I've never seen a seagull eat a hatchling, but I wouldn't put it past them.
True, seagulls are pretty greedy. They'll grab your fish and chips if they have a chance. So,
I mean, it's picture a sea turtle getting eaten by a bird, but what you have to remember is that when it's a baby turtle, it fits inside the palm of your hand. And it doesn't really have a hard shell yet, the way that an adult turtle has. So they're like little bite-sized snacks, unfortunately, for some of these birds and bigger fish.
Yeah, anything that can open their mouths, I guess, and pretty tempting, right? So let's transition. I just want to ask a few other questions. Someone wanted to know what do you have like a favorite aribada moment? I mean, I know it's probably the time you just kept seeing thousands. Is that your top one? Then what's your second favorite?
Um, okay, I'll pick two. So the first one would definitely be that video because that was such a new perspective of looking at it. And obviously, the first moment that I'll describe is the first Aribata I ever saw. I will never ever forget. We tend to get Aribatas every month of the year here, but when I first arrived, it just happened to be one of the months that the turtles skipped. And so there was a lot of anticipation. The whole town was like, where are the turtles? Like, worried that they weren't going to come. And one morning I woke up to, they have an announcer walk through the streets of Oceanswell to say, the turtles are here.
Huh?
And I went out on, I'll never forget because it was pouring rain. It was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. And we only use red lights on the beach at night. So I am just literally staring at my feet and dodging turtles, trying not to find sand to step on without tripping over turtles, and
Oh,
only seeing a few feet in front of you. And it's pitch black and pouring rain. But there was a thunderstorm that night, and when the lightning strikes, the entire beach lit up.
oh wow.
And you can see in front of you, I mean, I just saw a beach swarming with turtles. And occasionally we have to cross rivers, so we'll flash our white light really quickly and kind of pan it to make sure we're safe. And when you do that, also you just see, I mean, to me it looked like the way you would see a beehive covered with a bee swarm. That's what it looked like, and my jaw just dropped. It was just overwhelming because again, it's that change in perspective, right? I can only see in front of me, and all of a sudden you look up and you see just as far as you can see, the beach is covered with turtles. And that's my first favorite moment. And my second favorite moment, I have to put it out there because one night I was in between volunteer shifts. I was waiting for a new group to come help me, and I was on the beach all alone. I think it was maybe 3 a.m., pitch black, covered with turtles, and I wanted to find a place to rest. So I found a small log because there's nowhere on the beach I could sit where there were turtles. And I was trying to rest and I was almost falling asleep. And a turtle climbed up on top of me. And I will never forget that feeling of just like, there are so many turtles that this turtle is looking for a place to nest. And she decided to climb up on top of this log and on top of me to look for her nest.
Oh my
Um,
God.
absurd, absurd thing. Because again, even sea turtle biologists never get to experience this feeling of just like there's so many turtles I don't know where to sit.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, at least she didn't start to like dig you and then like lay eggs on you, which could have been a little bit awkward, right? It's good fun though. I mean, I have to say I'm really bummed. Like COVID has been obviously not a positive for the world in general, and there's been so many things. But personally, I want to put out there that as part of our mentor-mentee relationship, like I was gonna come and visit you, and I was looking at May or April or May as the months, and I was gonna book like my first kind of holiday. Though I told my friends about the fact that it was going to be a holiday, and they were like, "Yeah, but it's still work. It's like still marine creatures, and it's your kind of mentee." And I was like, no, but it was gonna be fun. I mean, this is what we think is holiday, right? And I was so for like, I kind of really kind of made that decision. And then of course this all happened. So I am still obviously gonna come out and see
Yes.
all this phenomenon. There's no doubt about it. Like I think it's a golden opportunity. I know I have an insider, which I think is magical. And I know with all the work that you've done, you also kind of have a sense of the timing, which is really great. Um, and so that's quite exciting. There is another question. Would you intervene to help or leave to nature? Is that an incomplete question, Jan? Or did I miss something? I'll keep going because I also have some other questions. And Jan, you can send that one through again or the rest of it. But I was gonna ask, so with okay, let's talk about you a little bit, right? Like I'd really like the audience to sort of like um kind of get to know okay, you know what, I'm gonna try the question again. I think it may be like if there's a predator coming for it, maybe would you intervene to help or leave it to nature? And I'm gonna just interpret that as the question, and then we'll move on to a little few quick personal questions before we wrap up. um
Fully charged when we started, it's already dying. So I will Stay on the
Oh,
line.
oh,
I'll be
okay.
right
I
back.
was like, yeah, yeah, no problem. Please take us on a tour around your home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is the question. If predators were like dogs were at the nest, would you
That's a
intervene
great question.
or regulate nature?
We do not intervene, especially if it's a natural predator. Um, but we do try to scare dogs away. We encourage people to intervene kind of indirectly. So there's no need to pick up a hatchling and put it in the ocean. Again, they've evolved over thousands of years and survived. um, but we do make sure that there's no obstacles, logs, trash, anything in the way. That there's a smooth area for them to get back to the sea safely, and do our best to scare predators away if we're there. But here in Oceanswell, there's no way we can be there for every sea turtle nest. Um, so there are actually members of the community do go out when there's what we call mass hatching, because every Aribara, when I didn't mention, is 45 days later, more or less. There's that hatchlings all at once, and in those cases, we do have community members out on the beach that are making sure at least the dogs and doing their best to
Mm.
scare away so the sea turtles have a chance.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the power of community. And I think it's amazing that the community has grown with this species and sort of grown to understand the value of the species to the point where they're all kind of volunteering their energy and effort and time to make sure they're safe. And I think that's pretty powerful. And it's a big deal. So that's very, very interesting. And I would like to ask you a few quick questions, before we wrap up. But really, like, again, I do want the audience to get to know a little bit about, I mean, you're not from Costa Rica, but you've dedicated many years to the turtles in Costa Rica, and for you it's a long-term relationship, and it's where you want to be in the longer term. And how did you end up there, and like how did you end up with turtles?
Well, I think it's kind of just maybe it's fate. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in fate, but it's just a crazy series of events that led me here. I consider myself a citizen of the world. I've traveled and moved around my whole life. I'm actually originally from Belgium. I grew up mostly in the United States, but my family traveled a lot. So I never really had a home. That is until I was 16 and I decided I wanted to learn Spanish and study abroad. And I came and lived with a family here in Costa Rica for 3 months. And I don't know if maybe in a past life I was Costa Rican, but I got here and I was like, oh my gosh, this is home. Like, I just had this overwhelming feeling of this is, where I belong. And since then, I've been really called to come back. And it got harder and harder to leave every time, and eventually I realized, no, this is where I need to be. And in part, it was part of that, my love for the ocean, my desire to work in conservation, that really got me interested in coming back to Costa Rica when I was in college. And when you Google Costa Rica conservation, the first up is sea turtles, and it's pretty much as simple as that. I went ahead and went to this turtle project. And when I was on the beach with the turtles, I just realized, just kind of like Costa Rica felt like home, sea turtle conservation just felt like the perfect fit for me. It's a very international field, group of, it's a really cool mixture of volunteers, people that are just passionate about turtles, and scientists. It's an incredible community, and it's a really cool environment to be in, and especially here in Costa Rica, where the environment and conservation have such a high priority. I can't think of anywhere else in the world I'd rather be, and anything else I'd rather be doing. So.
Oh, that's nice, and it's pretty resolute, and it's always nice to feel that sense of home. I think that's kind of it's a pretty big thing. I mean, I'm obviously born and brought up Sri Lankan. I went to university externally, which is sort of like different, the opposite to what you did, I guess. You maybe stopped moving for that little time you went to university and went back, went to the States or whatever. But I like left, and then, but from the moment I left, I always said I'm coming home. And there wasn't scope for being a marine biologist in Sri Lanka. And everyone's like, what are you going to do? Like, what's the point? And, you know, there's no scope. And I'm like, it's a tropical island. How does nobody understand? Like, there's ocean, right? And but I was just like, you know what, I'll carve my own niche. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had this yearning to come back to Sri Lanka and serve. And, you know, I kept my promise. I came back, and, you know, I'm the happiest I've ever been is just being home with all the chaos, right? And that's sort of nice. And it's that sense of home that I also feel very strongly here, that I think I can totally understand with you, you know, like, um, so, okay. So for you, like, you know, there's so much, you know, adventure in your life and stuff like that, and you've done so much. And so you did your PhD, and, you know, you did this amazing research that's kind of led you to be the go-to person for so many people when they want to know about the Aribadas there, or you know, documentary teams come out, they work with you, which is really cool. But, you know, what is it that like keeps you going? Like, what is it that drives you?
I don't know. I've had a lot of people call me the Energizer Buddy. I don't stop, and I don't know. It's just, I guess, my passion. You know, I have this like really, really, you know, Oceanwell has a really, really special place in my heart. It's just paradise on earth for me. You know, this country is incredible. Biodiversity. I mean, as a biologist, I can't think of anywhere better and more exciting to be, where there's like 3% of the entire world's biodiversity is in this tiny country. Seeing all of these things, just that feeling, I think of what I imagine, and I can't even imagine what it would have been like before humans had an impact on Earth, but just so feeling nature so abundantly around you, and I think that my passion to want to protect that, especially this site, this place where there are so many sea turtles, and wanting to share that with the world, really feeling that everyone deserves to come and experience that, because it has such a profound impact on you. It had a profound impact on me, and I know that it can make a big difference. I think that's what keeps me going, and it's not easy. There are a lot of times that I get overwhelmed, and it's challenging, and you know, there's crying, there's sleepless nights, but it's always worth it. It's just always worth it.
Yeah, I yep, definitely know that story. Definitely been in those positions, definitely, you know, dealt with the same things personally, but also, you know, that's what we've been working on, right? Like, how do we stop being overwhelmed, and how do we keep going, and how do we keep just a strong focus on the passion and making that difference? And I think you're doing a great job. And just, you know, to wrap up, really, I guess, and to everyone out there, you know, all these the Tiny Desk Adventure videos go up on our website as much as on our social media. The Q&As, also recordings, go up on the website and social media. And we also have these downloadable kind of Q&As that we ask, like just more, there's 10 questions that we ask every single guest that comes on, or our Tiny Desk Adventurer. And it really is more so you can get to know these people, because I think it's, you know, the work you can probably read about online and sort of there's that information, but you can never get to know, you know, the how a person functions and why and what drives them and what do they do and what's their rituals, and that's what we want to share with adventurers do. So to wrap up, I have one last question, and I would say, like, what's that one line of advice that you would give to just anyone who wants to live their best life?
Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. I think that and even yourself, because you might doubt yourself sometimes. Once you have, you know, once you know what you want your life to be, and that's the hardest part. Some people take, you know, until they're 50 to figure out, like, well, how do I want to live my life? As
Mm-hmm.
soon as you know that, you need to stick and not settle for anything else. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I cannot tell you how many times, I mean, how ridiculous is it to start a PhD and then pick up and move a year later? You know, there's so many things about my path that people were like, you know, this isn't how it's usually done, but I guess it's okay. And you know, you're gonna have to pave your own path, and yeah, just don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Yeah. And then once you pick that path, you got to work hard, right? It's not like it's going to happen magically overnight. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I think that we can both recognize that. And I'm sure there are people out there as well who are sort of on that journey or are, you know, kind of looking forward to where they want to be and sort of maybe sometimes overwhelmed with the challenges. But at the same time, like, you know, you have to go through that stuff to get to where you want to go. You have to work bloody hard, right? Like, and that's just a given. And so you have to be prepared for that. But the only one who can prepare you for that is you, right? So just keep plodding. And you know, this has been.
Yeah, and you,
Sorry, keep going.
it's a part of the process. You know, I was gonna say you have to go through it. It's a part of the process.
Yeah.
It, obviously, I wish everything were easier, but I also wouldn't be here if I hadn't had to go through all of those challenges.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is exactly what I said at the talk that I just did. There was a question about like you know, what one piece of advice, and I always say, you know, challenges are things you can climb over or walk around, right? Like they're not so big that you can never get through it. But you have to like just keep working, and also the challenges are what really make the journey interesting. And I always say, like, nobody would invite me to go and stand on the stage and speak if my story was just like, I woke up, I went to school, I went to university, I became a marine biologist, I had a scuba tank strapped to my back. Like, who cares, right? Like, that's a bland story. And the story is really, it's not in where you end up, it's in how you get there. And that's what people have to recognize, right? So don't also be in a hurry to get to that end destination, because one thing is it's constant, there's always an evolution, right? And I think that's really important for us to remember as well. But yeah, so thank you very much, Vanessa. This has been really fantastic. I always enjoy talking to you, as we always do at least once a month. It's been fun, and I personally have really enjoyed seeing your growth over the last many months that we've been working together. Just kind of, it's been a privilege to be your mentor, and just to see, like, you are an Energizer Bunny. You do kind of have your dreams, and they're not just fluffy dreams, though. They're very concrete dreams, right? Built on reality, that you kind of charge towards. And I mean, the stuff you're doing, you know, through your organization. So please do follow Nosara Wildlife Conservation, everybody, to find out more about what they're doing. They also work with kids. So they kind of parallel organizations. That's kind of why we were paired to work together, is like, the way we work and the way we think is very much similar. We believe in sharing. We believe in bringing people in. We believe in having local partners. But also we believe in science and the power of that kind of research to make a change. So I love it. I love it. This has been excellent. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Costa Rica. Loads of people really excited about your stories and the amazing conversation. So I'm going to take some credit for that, guys. But probably they don't probably need me. And also, actually, Nadia works with me. She's probably like, I've heard your voice enough. So let's, like, I'm really interested in Vanessa's. But yeah, you've been really inspiring, and I think that's really great. And I am personally super excited to come out to Costa Rica and lie on the beach and have a turtle climb on me and potentially try to lay eggs on me, which would be a bit weird, but I would love to also experience that with you. And I can't think of a better person to do it with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.